Good evening.
Hello.
Hi, this is Daniel.
Good to hear from you, Daniel.
Yes.
I'm adjusting levels here. I've got a recording device on.
Okay, great.
So the way that this normally works is I will record the interview, and there will be a printed transcription in the next print edition, and also the edition that will be on the website on October 1st. And then later in October, we will put the audio on our YouTube channel.
I see. Okay, wonderful.
So tell me a little bit about yourself. Let's start easy. What's your name and where are you located?
Yes, well, my first name is Daniel, and my last name you pronounce Ouellette. Even though it's an O, it makes a W sound. It's a French name. I am originally from Massachusetts, but I'm currently living in Chesapeake Beach, Maryland, which is about 30 miles east of Washington, D.C. We're right on the bay, Chesapeake Bay.
I see. And how long have you been there?
3 years. We've been down in this area for about 8, but I've been here for about 3.
Okay. So tell me a little bit about him. You became interested in writing music. How old were you when you started to sing or play an instrument?
I was a teenager. I was, gosh, maybe 13, 14. I still have some of those recordings. They're on cassettes in my closet. And so I'm going to give away my age here, but I still have a recording of one of the first songs that I had written, which was 1987. It was this little pop song about Russian satellites watching everything we do. Because that was such a big thing at that time, to have all these songs about social issues like that, which is important to have these things anyhow. But it's a very quirky and unusual song, and I don't know how much my songwriting has changed in the 30 something years it's been.
Yes, I was listening. I was listening to your album Otherworld earlier today, and I definitely, the word quirky was one of the things that I got in my mind, and also it's definitely has a new wave influence for sure.
Oh yes, definitely. That's my favorite sort of genre to listen to. So I just sort of make music that I like to hear, and hopefully other people enjoy it. And if they don't, that's okay too.
And if you were playing this in the late '80s, did you start on a synthesizer, or how what did you start on in terms of writing?
Well, the first instrument we had in our home was this organ that didn't have legs and it sat on the floor, and so everything sounded like a B-52 song then. So I guess it's an early version of a synthesizer, although I know the synthesizers came around then. We'd get all these hand-me-down instruments from who knows where. Relatives would drop them off. They were usually some sort of organ that when you plugged it in, it just breathed. It was like, so so that's when I started to sort of pluck away. And then I took instrument lessons here and there, the recorder, the drums, the piano. But the keyboards, the synthesizer were always, and the drums were always my favorite to play. So that's what I would always concentrate on. I'm not much with, I tried playing the, oh, what is that called? The dulcimer. And it's fun and it makes great noises, but I wasn't very good at it. I really don't love to play in front of people. I love to perform and sing, but I don't love to play instruments in front of people because it's hard to hard for me to concentrate. So I say bravo to anyone who can do both.
And did you study music in school at all, or like did you take band or anything like that?
No, I wasn't in band. I was always kind of on the outside of certain things, so I didn't. I, I I went to work after school and stuff like that. We weren't, we didn't have like music lessons and things like that until I paid for them myself. Um, so that's when I started to take lessons when I paid for the drum lessons or I paid for the piano lessons, not in school band or anything like that. But I joined bands or I started bands with schoolmates. And it was more of the performance and the spectacle and the sort of artists that I draw inspiration from. I kind of feel a little bit like like a magpie or a minor bird or whatever, the kind of thing where you take in what you enjoy and you send it out in a way that you send out your message.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Do you do any collaboration with others?
Yes, quite a bit actually, because I don't like to record myself, even though I can do it. And sometimes I enjoy it if I really want a lo-fi kind of, like some of my older recordings. If you go back and listen to things around 2008, my very first album is kind of a backwards thing where I just took a whole bunch of what do you call that, demos, and I have them mastered, and I released that as kind of a non-greatest hits, if you will. And then I started to work with other people, because when it comes to being technical, I can be pretty messy. I'm not very good at multitasking. So, like, for example, this particular album that you listened to, I worked with my friend Elizabeth Laurie. She was the recording engineer, but she worked with me on writing the music and the synth part. She actually plays all the synths on this particular album. Sometimes I do it sporadically. I tend to do the percussion programming and as of late, but in over the years, I've collaborated with guitarists and bass players and singers and other songwriters. So yes.
Great. So tell me, do you have when? Let me ask you this way. What did you ever work specifically on an album, back when you first started?
Yeah, I mean, what I would do is I would make albums, if you will, but I didn't publish them or master them until sometime in the 2000s. So for a good 20 years, I would just sort of do these guerrilla performances, and I would just make up sort of very lo-fi albums that I didn't release to the public.
Okay.
So wait, I've been recording and writing since the late 80s.
Did you attend a lot of shows that other people put on?
That's a good question. No and yes. I'm in a certain period, yes, but when I was young, I lived out in the countryside in Massachusetts, which is 100 years away from any city action if you do not drive. And I didn't drive for quite a while because I was afraid. Myself and Cindy Lauper, we were both afraid to drive. So, and I had it thought in my mind that I would, I should probably just ride in the back of the car, like in a limo. So I didn't drive for a while. So when I was young, not really. I missed sort of the heyday of the Boston club scene throughout the late 80s, through the 80s, the 90s. And I just kind of worked and went to college. And I mean, I worked 3 jobs and I went to college and I was working on my music, but I wasn't out going to a lot of shows. I would go see sort of big name artists every once in a while. And I didn't start going to clubs until club shows until the early 90s. And that was when I was in college. So that's when I would go to sort of, not big name acts, and I would go to Providence and not so much Boston,
Okay.
because it was closer to where I lived.
Okay.
But yeah.
So what did you study in school? You mentioned you were in school.
Well, first I studied visual art, and then I switched over, and I actually was a Spanish major, and I studied Spanish, and I have a master's degree in Spanish, and I actually taught Spanish for 14 years at the University of Massachusetts, at the Dartmouth campus. So that's what I studied, along with art, so painting, drawing, printmaking, things like that, and then with language studies, I also studied art history.
Oh, interesting.
Hmm.
What movements interested you in particular?
Well, after all of the studying, I found that I had no awareness until I started studying in Madrid about sort of what was called the movimiento madrileño, which is kind of like this renaissance of outlandish art and music that reminds me a bit of sort of the Warhol era of the late 60s in New York. And so that's where Pedro Almodovar and so a lot of actors, actresses, and musicians come from. It's very new wave as well. So I like that a lot. I'm very influenced by that. As far as
what era was that? Like what decade?
that was the 80s. That was the early 80s. There's a wonderful artist who I adore. Her name is Alaska, and she was in two bands, and now she's in a band called Fangoria, and a lot of the themes are very similar to the types of songs that I sing now. And then, even before I knew who she was, we were kind of coexisting. And then when I learned who she was and enjoyed her music, we had very similarities, pardon me.
Yeah, when I was listening to it earlier, I definitely noticed, obviously, very 1980s influence, but it does come at it a little bit of a left and center way. It's definitely like the production and the sort of tone that you would hear in the 80s, but your actual songwriting is just, you seem to come at it just a little bit skewed. Do you do that on purpose?
I don't know. Because I try not to, like, I don't want to sound like the 80s, even though I'm using drum machines and synthesizers, in the sense that, it's not meant to sound like the 80s as much as it sometimes does. As far as the way I write, as of late, I've been writing in a very interesting way that I'm sure other people who sing may have written do write, which is I've been doing my percussion patterns, and then I will sing the song without any music. So I'll sing the verses, I'll sing the choruses, and then what Elizabeth was doing was writing the music around what I sang. So this particular album and the one before it, there are a few songs where I like the take so much that we never changed it. So sometimes the song was sung with just beats.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense because, again, it's like you're painting with similar colors, but you're painting a completely different construction. That's the way that's the way I would put it. Now, who is Elizabeth? You just mentioned Elizabeth.
Yes, well, she's the person I worked with on Elizabeth Laurie. She's the person I worked with on this current album. She played the synths on this album.
Oh, great.
She's the recording engineer.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah.
Now, you said you did it differently. Does that mean that normally when you work on an album, you don't do it in that way?
Well, on past albums, I would write the music and then do the singing afterwards, or I would write a song, I'd compose the song, and then I would write lyrics to it. Where this way I wrote lyrics and sang, and then wrote the music around the singing. And I've been doing that for the past maybe 4 years, doing it in a different in sort of a backward. Well, I don't know that it's backwards. It's just kind of a different way than I wrote songs before, where I would sit down and write out what I was going to play and then play it, and then build off of that.
And what made you decide to experiment with it being this way?
Actually, the idea of doing performances without, if I didn't have a band and sort of, I don't know, I'm sure, but I don't want to assume. You're aware of The Creatures, which was a Susie Sue and Budgie project where it was vocals and percussion. And this was throughout the 80s and the 90s and to the early 2000s. And so I was inspired by the idea that if I needed to do a show and I didn't have anyone around me and I didn't want to use backing track, because sometimes I use backing tracks to do performances, I could just do a performance with vocal and percussion.
Well, that's interesting. Do you have, is that available online at all to listen to?
What's that? A show like that? I did one album like that, but that was in 2013 or 14. But I did one performance that way so far, and I haven't seen any recordings, so I guess they don't exist.
Okay.
Oh well, it's the vampire recording. Somebody didn't get the reflection.
Okay,
and
great.
I have to ask a very dumb question, which isn't that dumb, but your name is Ryan, is it not?
That's right.
Yes, okay, good.
Yeah, Ryan O'Dowd.
Right.
That's okay. We've never met each other before. We only know one another.
I said my name, and I didn't even, I'm just like, well, hello, how are you?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
No, that's all right.
It's so easy to get caught up when you're doing an interview in like I have to give all the, I'm pushing energy at you, and it's your job to expand on it. You know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah.
So, are there any recordings of yours from the past that really stand out to you as like your favorites, or that you think are the most interesting?
Yeah, like there's a favorite from every sort of recording. Yes.
Yeah.
I would say early on, there's a song called "The Moon Is Full of Love," and I love that song. And there's two versions of it. There's the early demo version from 2008, and it's kind of messy but fun as well, because I didn't release it as anything other than this is some demos that have been mastered. So I was, I think a few reviewers were a little thrown by it. Somebody was upset by it, and I don't get that. Well, I like that they're upset, and somebody was upset by my last album too. And I was like, okay, it's fine to not like it, because I never had anybody be cruel or anything, but just, I get it when it's not somebody's thing, they're not going to listen to it. But so "The Moon Is Full of Love" is a particular favorite of mine.
And how is that structured? What was the instrumentation on that song?
The instrumentation is percussion, a drum machine, a bass. There are two versions. One is with synth, and the other version is with cello and violin. And the cello violin is my favorite.
Yeah.
And it's great because I'm working with some friends of mine who actually three of them are sisters.
Oh wow.
Yeah, Anne-Marie, Teresa, and Elizabeth Cleary. They're from Massachusetts, and each one of them is an accomplished musician. And they recorded this song with me. I believe also my friend Deirdre is playing backup. I hope I'm not leaving someone out, but it's that's a particular favorite of mine. It was one of the first songs that was well received when I was playing live, when I was starting to play live, because I would do live shows sporadically for years. And then when I was around a certain age, I decided to sort of go out and start playing at open mics. And I would sort of stick out like a sore thumb because I was the only one without the acoustic guitar.
Right.
Which is okay. That works for me. Let me see. But you were asking me about other songs. There's a song called "A Wolf in California" that I love as well. That one is special because it came about from a conversation I had with my niece, and then the song sort of took life into sort of this meaning about how, about how sometimes, especially it would be like I would think about like moms and aunts, and sort of a continuation to the song "Girls Just Want to Have Fun," where women always had to do these chores for the holiday and everyone else is sitting around having a good time. So it was that song is kind of fun or interesting to tell that sort of story.
I see.
And I think I cut you off. I'm sorry.
No, I just said I see.
Mm-hmm. But let me see what else. I love on the album a couple years ago. There's 3 songs that are really special to me. One of them is a song called "Duérmete," which is in Spanish, and it sort of sings about the idea of telling a child to go to sleep, like in a lullaby, but while they're sleeping, just be aware that there's always someone or something looking through the window at you, because you want the kids to sleep nicely. And then there's another song on the album. And it's called "O Lindo Sonambulo," which means a beautiful sleepwalker, and that is about just sort of dreaming and wishing and the things that you want, but really what you need is a haunted house. And then lastly, there's a song called "Velvet Divan," and that song is a song that tells a story about, it's sort of I always say that it's a kind of song you sing when you're running away from someone or you're leaving a job, and you turn this song on and you drive away waving. That's so those are sort of some of special songs to me from the past. I mean, I don't want to name 100 of them,
right,
or anything,
sure.
unless you want.
So I've noticed you have, you said you in college you studied Spanish, and you have a lot of Spanish title names. Is that related to your background, or what made you interested in that?
Spanish was one of the, when we're in high school, we're offered to start studying a language. And I always tell this funny little story that I became pretty good at Spanish because the heritage or background, we're Americans, but the heritage and the background of my mom's family is Portuguese, Azorian Portuguese.
Oh, interesting.
And of my father, my father is French Canadian background. Not both of them just speak English, but, the grandparents and the older people would kind of know the languages. More so, I think we heard French more than Portuguese, but we hear Portuguese a lot. So in southeastern Massachusetts anyhow. So it was sort of, I thought, I'll study Spanish because, Portugal's over here and France is over there and Spain is in the middle. So that was sort of my, 13-year-old thought of how to, or 14-year-old thought about studying Spanish. And so it just sort of became something I was good at the time. So then when I went to college, I just started taking any opportunity to studying to learn Spanish, and I joined what was called an international club, and I would meet with other students, and we would do these things where we became friends, but also we would have a day where we just go hang out and we'd speak English all day, or we'd speak Spanish all day, or I would speak Spanish and my friend would speak English, or in reverse. And I mean, we're lifelong friends. We still talk to each other this day. It's been 30 years.
Oh. Did you collaborate with them at all?
Oh, no, she doesn't play music.
Okay. Are you influenced by Sorry.
Go ahead.
Are you influenced by music from that part of the world?
Well, I mean, there's such a variety of music in the Spanish language, and yes, I love. Well, of course, as I was mentioning, the movido madrileño, the music from Spain in the 80s was very interesting. But then there's I love. Flamenco music is gorgeous. The singing, the passion, mariachi, rancheros. I love just sort of any kind of. There's a few pop musicians who I enjoy in Spanish. There's a lot of post-punk and new wave in Spanish, and this also is the true for Portuguese and French, because I started after learning Spanish, I hooked on to learning French better than well, I didn't know it really. Nobody in, the older people who I didn't see very much, they knew some French, but we didn't in our household. So I took French when I was in college, and then did the same thing, just started knowing people. And then with Portuguese, the same thing. Although I don't, I kind of mix them all up sometimes, but not a lot.
What did you do after college?
I taught Spanish. First I did a little roaming around trying to figure out what I was going to do with myself, and then I taught Spanish, and then my spouse and I had moved down to DC, and then I stopped teaching Spanish and started playing music and doing video editing. I played music before, but I continued to play music, and then I started doing video editing for other artists.
Do you have any videos you've made for your own pieces?
I make almost all of them. Actually, I make all of them. So if you go to my YouTube, I either have filmed them or I have edited them. Sometimes I will buy stock footage. I used to use film from way back in the early periods of film when the copyright was past due, but then I decided I didn't really like doing that. So, because it's not really, I don't know. So I've done things like I've filmed myself. I paint. There's one video where I did a whole bunch of paintings and then I put myself in it.
So it sounds like you're very multidisciplinary. You work with a lot of different media.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, but I do either or edit or film or storyboard. Sometimes I like to, the videos for this particular project, I haven't really wanted to film myself. I hadn't had that impression to do so. So I've been doing a lot of just sort of concept videos for this album. The video before it, I was in the videos a bit more, or all of them, I think.
Okay,
I was
excellent.
in all of them.
And your YouTube page, would you just write your name into the search bar to find it? Okay.
Yep, exactly. YouTube / let me see, what does it say? I'm going to tell you right now. Yeah, it's youtube.com/C/Daniel Ouellette.
Okay, excellent. Easy.
But you can, just typing in my name. Of course, my name gets misspelled all the time. That's okay, though.
Well, good thing that this is in print, and also when it's on our YouTube page, it'll have your name right there, too. So, let me ask you this. Is there anything you would like to promote?
Well, I've got this new album called Other World, where it's been out for about almost 2 months now. I'm doing several performances that are coming up. So, well, you said this will be in October. So, in October, I will be performing in New York City on October 3rd at Heaven Can Wait with Winky and Ice Blink. And they are both bands that consist of people who I know and adore. So I'm very excited about that. And that's October 3rd in New York City. It's in Manhattan.
Okay.
October 9th, I will be on a radio show in Boston for WMFO, and it's called On the Town with Mikey D. And that's kind of like going home. I've done that show several times in the past, so that's very exciting. And then October 12th, I will be playing in Salem, Massachusetts, just in time for pre-Halloween, my favorite, at an event called Dark Salem. And then lastly, there is a show on November 2nd, which I believe is All Souls Day and spills over into El Dia de los Muertos. And that will be here in Chesapeake Beach, and it is a goth prom. So, if you find yourself in Maryland and you want to put on your favorite black lipstick and dance by the sea, that's what will be happening, and that will be for it's a metaphysical shop called Dusk and Willow, and they're having this goth prom, and so myself and another new wavy band called Fun Never Starts from Baltimore with my friend Jenny McTee, who I've collaborated on music with, and another pal who I've collaborated with music. His name is LJ Tisdale, and he does more of a synth wave music called Metronix, and we'll be doing the goth prom. So
Very cool.
There's some things to promote. There's a whole mouthful of things.
Okay. What do you have a process? Is there a way that you normally approach doing your work?
A lot of times it starts with lyric writing. I will hear something somebody will say, and it will either become the title of the song, and then the song will then take on a different life or remain holding whatever it was somebody had said. So a lot of times it's just I'll hear something. I'll hear somebody say something, a sentence, if you will. Oh, I didn't turn that light on, and when I did, I hated everything I saw. So I'm like, oh, well, that sounds like a lyric to me. And so then the song will start from there. Now, there is no song with that, but there might have to be after mentioning it. So that sometimes is what happens. I will just I'll hear one sentence and then write a song. And I tend to write lyrics rather quickly. I don't know why. I'm glad that I can. But
do you script?
But it doesn't mean they're good.
Do you write by hand or you type?
A little of both. It depends on whatever I'm feeling at that moment. I actually prefer, for some strange reason, to write lyrics in my Google email in the draft, because I figure I can go back to it on whatever device I'm near.
Sure.
And I also have a little, the pen or the pencil and the notebook, because that's always a good fallback. Wherever you're stuck, you can always start writing. But usually lyrics start first.
Okay, very interesting. So my final question is this. Is there anything in particular you were hoping to talk about we weren't able to, and if so, please feel free to talk about it now.
Yeah, actually, what brought you to me? Where did you find me? I'm very curious about this.
I had a friend give me your name. I've been doing issues now. We're working on number 89. It's monthly.
Cool.
And I long ago interviewed all my friends. So I started expanding outward and doing other kinds of things, and it finally got to the point where I'm like, well, why don't I see if any of the artists that have contributed to the magazine to be reviewed want to reference me to someone else, and you were one of the names that got referenced.
That is wonderful. I love that. Well, thank you, friend. I watched Bride of Frankenstein last night, so friend, good. Very good. That's wonderful. Yeah, and I don't know. I mean, are you excited about Halloween season now? Because now it seems to me that I'm seeing that Halloween now begins on September 1st.
Yeah, people, there's always a good show on Halloween. I like playing Halloween if I can. It's a good time for anything a little dark, sounding or a little sinister sounding, which is more how I vibe most of the time. And yeah, I like Halloween just fine. It's good.
Do you play solo or with an act? Because now I need to listen to you since you've listened to me.
All right. Well, I write solo, but then I collaborate with other musicians when I'm playing live most of the time. My friend Declan sings backup most of the time, and then I kind of have like a handful of people that, depending on what part of the country I'm in, they'll kind of join me on stage or whatever.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. Yep. Right now, my friend Austin Glover, he's a saxophone player. He'll be playing with me in beginning of October. So
nice.
Yeah.
And you, well, and I suppose I can do this by just writing to you. So you.
That's also true.
I mean, of course. Where can I hear you? Recording wise.
bitterinc.bandcamp.com. That's bitterinc.bandcamp.com. I'll shoot you a link in our messaging.
Yeah, lovely.
Yeah.
That's lovely. Wonderful.
Thank you.
But no, I mean, there's nothing. I just love, I'll chat your ear off. I'll just keep going. And then another thing, like Columbo in a black trench coat instead of a brown one.
I like the little reverse interview at the end. That's nice. But yeah, we could do more in chat as well, in DMing.
Sure.
So thank you for agreeing to this interview.
Oh yeah.
The print edition and it will also be online. Will be out on October 1st. I'll tag you in that. I'll also mail you a copy for free if you want it.
Okay.
And then the YouTube audio will be on the YouTube channel later in October. So.
Oh, wonderful. I don't know if I'll want to hear myself, but other people will. Oh, thank you so much. Very fun. And I hope that you have a wonderful evening.
You too, Daniel. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.